Most people don't even realize they're trapped. The walls around them aren't made of steel or stone, but of silent expectations. You can feel it when you speak an idea that others don't understand. The quick glance, the subtle discomfort, the quiet urge to shrink yourself back into something acceptable. This is how society maintains its quiet order. Not through force, but through agreement. We learn early that it's safer to blend in than to stand out. And so, most of us build our cages willingly, decorating them with approval and calling it peace. There's a hidden fear that controls almost everyone, the fear of standing out. You don't need anyone to tell you this fear exists. You feel it in your body, like a small warning whenever you say something that sounds too different. You might tell yourself it's humility, but often it's survival. The crowd doesn't like reminders of what it refuses to face. Nietzsche understood this early. To think differently is to step into the cold, where no one will hold your hand. But it's also where truth begins to breathe. As a young man, Nietzsche was always out of place. While others found comfort in religion or academia, he found only questions. He walked alone through forests, filling notebooks with thoughts no one wanted to hear. His peers called him arrogant, strange, even dangerous. But in his solitude, he began to notice something. The ideas that made him an outsider were also the seeds of his genius. He realized that the same sensitivity that isolated him gave him access to truths hidden from the herd. Society is a machine designed for comfort, not truth. The herd finds safety in agreement, and that safety feels like belonging. But what is belonging if it requires you to lie to yourself? Most people choose comfort because truth asks too much. It asks you to stand alone. And in a world that worships approval, standing alone looks like failure. Nietzsche saw this clearly. To live authentically is to become a stranger among your own kind. Thinking differently is a kind of rebellion, but not the loud kind people romanticize. It's a silent, invisible rebellion that begins in the mind. You start questioning why things are the way they are. You notice patterns others ignore. And every time you speak your truth, you risk being misunderstood. It's a quiet war, fought not with weapons but with honesty. Nietzsche believed that this inner rebellion is the birth of freedom, the point where thought becomes courage. The world loves noise. Endless conversations that say nothing, trends that repeat themselves, opinions that echo like a loop. When everyone agrees, it feels safe, but only because no one is thinking. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, and he despised it. The more people agree, the less truth survives. To think deeply in such a world feels like walking through fog, searching for something that might not even exist. Yet the act of searching itself becomes sacred. Belonging comes at a cost. Every time you suppress a thought to keep the peace, a small part of you fades. Every time you hide your difference to stay accepted, your soul pays a price. Over time, you start to forget what your real voice sounds like. That's how conformity kills, not suddenly but slowly, quietly, through the comfort of being liked. Nietzsche saw this decay everywhere, and he warned that comfort is the slow death of the spirit. There comes a moment when you start seeing differently. It doesn't feel like enlightenment, it feels like exile. You notice things others ignore. The falseness of small talk, the repetition of lives lived on autopilot, the fear behind people's smiles. The first, it hurts. You want to go back, but you can't unsee what's real. That's when you realize thinking differently isn't a choice anymore. It's a condition. And once it begins, you can't return to the person you were before. Nietzsche's first great insight was that truth begins in discomfort. Growth rarely feels good at first. He believed that pain is not the enemy of the thinker. It's the signal that you're touching something real. The moment you feel out of place, that's the moment your awakening starts. Every uncomfortable truth is a doorway. The question is whether you have the courage to walk through it, knowing that comfort will not follow you there. So why think differently at all, if it means loneliness, exile, and endless misunderstanding? Because the alternative is worse. The price of belonging is the death of the self. Thinking differently is not about being right, it's about being alive. It's about refusing to trade your inner truth for outer approval. Nietzsche believed that the few who dare to think for themselves carry the torch of humanity forward, even if they walk alone in the dark. Maybe that's the secret power, not to escape isolation, but to transform it into light. There's a strange peace that comes when you finally stop trying to be understood. For a long time, you chase validation, hoping someone will see you as you truly are. But most of the world isn't built to understand depth, it's built to maintain rhythm. When you begin to think differently, that rhythm starts to sound offbeat, and you become the noise that doesn't fit. It's lonely at first, but slowly, you begin to realize that solitude isn't punishment. It's space to hear your own voice without distortion. The modern world is an echo chamber. Every opinion, every belief, bounces off walls of repetition. People don't think, they repeat. They scroll, react, mimic. Nietzsche saw this long before the age of algorithms. He knew that the crowd loves its own reflection, not truth. To escape this echo chamber, you must walk into silence. A silence that feels almost unbearable at first. But it's in that silence where the first real thoughts appear, fragile and unfamiliar, like sparks in the dark. At one point, Nietzsche turned his back on academia. He resigned from his position as a respected professor at just 24. To the world, it looked like madness, a promising scholar throwing away prestige for solitude. But he understood something vital. Institutions reward obedience, not originality. True thought cannot survive in cages built by approval. He chose loneliness over compromise, and it cost him everything. Yet that loss was his liberation. Only outside the system could he create something the system could never imagine. Every original thinker pays a price. To think differently means to walk a road that has no signs, no maps, and no applause. It's not just intellectual isolation, it's emotional exile. You'll lose people you thought would stay. You'll watch the crowd move on without you. But Nietzsche would say, that's how you know you're on the right path. The truth has never been a place for the comfortable. It's a mountain climb, not a garden walk. Only those who dare to suffer their own thoughts reach the peak. There is power in silence. When you withdraw from the constant noise, something inside begins to grow, a quiet strength. Most people fear silence because it forces them to face themselves. But when you embrace it, you start to hear things others can't. The sound of your own mind. The rhythm of your real desires. Nietzsche lived much of his life in silence, wandering the Alps with nothing but his notebooks. That silence wasn't emptiness, it was fullness, waiting to be translated into words. The outsider holds a mirror no one wants to look into. When you speak a truth that challenges comfort, people won't thank you for it, they'll call you difficult, cold, or delusional. But what they're really seeing is themselves, stripped of illusion. The misfit becomes a mirror of honesty, and most can't bear the reflection. Nietzsche understood this tension. To speak truth is to become the villain in the eyes of the herd. But being misunderstood isn't failure, it's proof that you're speaking from a higher altitude. Before every ascent, there's a valley. The valley is where you doubt yourself, where every idea feels pointless and every effort feels unseen. Nietzsche wrote of these dark nights often. He knew that before transformation comes despair. The valley teaches humility. It breaks your ego and prepares you for clarity. Without that descent, the peak means nothing. So when you feel lost, remember, even the greatest minds walked through the fog before they saw the light. The valley is not the end, it's the beginning of the climb. There are times when you speak and no one listens. Times when your silence is mistaken for weakness. Times when you are invisible in rooms filled with noise. It hurts deeply. You start to wonder if you're the one who's wrong. But then you notice something small. The peace that comes when you no longer need to explain yourself. Understanding isn't always connection, sometimes it's conformity. Nietzsche would tell you, it's better to be unseen for your truth than celebrated for your imitation. Nietzsche's letters reveal a man who carried deep loneliness. He wrote of feeling abandoned, misunderstood, and painfully human. His health was failing, his friendships crumbling, and yet he kept writing, kept pushing his mind beyond its limits. There's something sacred in that persistence. To keep creating even when the world turns away. His suffering didn't destroy him, it purified him. Each letter, each word, was a fragment of survival, proof that even in despair, the spirit can continue its work. From that loneliness, something extraordinary was born. Clarity. The realization that solitude is not emptiness, it's transformation. When the noise fades, when you stop chasing understanding, you begin to hear the sound of your own becoming. That's what Nietzsche discovered. To be misunderstood is not a curse but a calling. It means you've stepped outside the script and started to write your own. Pain becomes perspective, and isolation becomes insight. The courage to be misunderstood is the courage to become fully yourself. Most people live their lives trying to be good. They follow the rules, say the right things, stay within the lines drawn by others. But Nietzsche saw danger in this. He believed that when we cling too tightly to the idea of being good, we stop being real. The desire to be good becomes a mask, and behind that mask, our instincts suffocate. He asked a question few dare to ask. What if goodness itself is just another form of control? What if the true self exists beyond the labels we were taught to obey? Nietzsche didn't believe morality was sacred. He saw it as a story, one written by humans to manage their fears. For centuries, we've been told what's right and what's wrong, who to love, what to desire, what to fear. But these rules weren't handed down from the heavens. They were crafted by people, often the weak, to keep the strong in line. When Nietzsche questioned morality, he wasn't promoting chaos. He was freeing the mind from inherited guilt. To him, real freedom begins when you start asking where your morals come from. He studied history not as a scholar collecting facts, but as a philosopher dissecting illusions. He saw that every civilization builds its morality on survival needs. What's called virtue in one age becomes sin in another. The moral codes we worship are not eternal truths but temporary strategies. Nietzsche wanted us to see this clearly, to recognize that our sense of good and evil is shaped by power, not purity. And once you see that, the world stops being black and white. It becomes alive, complex, and painfully honest. One of Nietzsche's most powerful ideas was his distinction between slave morality and master morality. Slave morality, he said, was born from weakness, from those who couldn't act on their power and so redefined weakness as virtue. They praised humility because they were afraid of strength. They called obedience good because rebellion scared them. Master morality, on the other hand, was born from vitality, from those who affirmed life on their own terms. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about creation. To live by your own values instead of those given to you. But Nietzsche wasn't simply telling us to be immoral. He was asking us to move beyond morality altogether, to live from authenticity instead of rulebooks. Beyond good and evil doesn't mean evil wins, it means the old game ends. When you stop dividing the world into good and bad, you start to see things as they are. People stop being villains or saints. They become human. You begin to see that cruelty and compassion, strength and sensitivity, all exist in the same soul. And from that acceptance, wisdom grows. Thinking freely is dangerous work. Once you begin to question what you were taught, you can't stop. Each belief you unlearn exposes another. It's like pulling threads from a tapestry, soon the entire pattern unravels. Nietzsche knew that freedom comes with a price: loneliness, uncertainty, and endless self-examination. But he also knew that this is the only path toward true individuality. To think for yourself means walking away from every borrowed certainty. It's terrifying, but it's also the only honest way to live. In our time, the herd morality Nietzsche warned about has found new shapes. It doesn't live in churches anymore. It lives in algorithms, in trends, in the hunger to belong online. We curate our goodness now. We perform empathy, display virtue, and cancel what makes us uncomfortable. Nietzsche would have seen through it all. He'd say it's still the same fear, the fear of being wrong, the fear of standing apart from the group. We've just replaced old temples with new ones, but the worship hasn't changed. Letting go of certainty is like walking into fog. You no longer know what's right or wrong, who to trust, or where to step next. It feels like falling. Nietzsche wrote that most people can't handle this kind of freedom. It feels too heavy, too cold. But for those who endure it, something begins to shift. Without rigid morals, life stops being a battlefield of shoulds and shouldn'ts. It becomes a canvas. You stop asking what's allowed and start asking what's true for you. That's the moment you begin to think originally. And when you finally think for yourself, something miraculous happens. The world opens. Every belief, every fear, becomes a question rather than a rule. You see beauty where others see sin. You find compassion in strength and power in vulnerability. Thinking differently doesn't mean rejecting morality, it means creating your own, one rooted in understanding rather than obedience. This is where Nietzsche's joy lived, in the freedom to define your life as art, not as duty. To live not by fear, but by insight. From this transformation arises a new kind of human, a creator. Someone who doesn't just inherit values but invents them. Nietzsche called this the birth of the free spirit. When the old gods fall silent, the thinker becomes the artist of meaning. The world no longer tells you who you are, you tell the world. But this freedom isn't light, it's a burden. To live without ready-made morality means to take full responsibility for your existence. That's the paradox Nietzsche left us with, liberation and its weight. And it leads us to the next question. Not just how to think differently, but how to create differently. There comes a moment when everything you believed in collapses. The systems, the meanings, the rules, they all begin to fade like old paint on a wall. It feels like the death of everything you knew, but Nietzsche saw it as the beginning of creation. When the old gods die, the world doesn't end, it opens. In that silence, something ancient stirs inside you, whispering that meaning was never given to you. It was waiting to be made by you. Destruction isn't the opposite of creation, it's the space that allows it. When Nietzsche said, "God is dead," he wasn't celebrating a victory, he was warning us. He meant that our old sources of certainty, religion, morality, tradition, had lost their power. Humanity had outgrown its myths but hadn't yet found new ones. Without them, we drift in a void, searching for meaning in a sky that no longer answers. For most, that emptiness feels unbearable. But Nietzsche believed that within that emptiness lies freedom, the freedom to become your own source of light, to write your own scripture of values. The abyss is terrifying. When everything you believed in disappears, you stand alone, face to face with nothing. Nietzsche called this confrontation the test of strength. Most people turn away, running back to comfort, religion, or distraction. But a few stay. They stare into the void long enough to see that it's not just darkness, it's possibility. The abyss gives back what you bring to it. If you approach it with fear, it consumes you. But if you approach it with creation, it reflects your power. In that emptiness, a new compass begins to form. It doesn't point north or south, it points inward. Nietzsche believed that each person must become their own North Star, an inner guide shaped by self-discovery, not by obedience. This means building your own moral code, one that grows from experience rather than tradition. It means asking not "what should I do?" but "what feels true to me?" It's not easy. It's messy and uncertain. But that's what real creation looks like. Clarity born from confusion. Life, Nietzsche said, should be lived as a work of art. Every choice, every struggle, every joy becomes a brushstroke. To create yourself is to sculpt your identity, not as a fixed form but as something always evolving. You are both the artist and the clay. The process never ends. You fall, rebuild, question, and reinvent. The beauty isn't in perfection but in persistence, the courage to keep shaping meaning even when the world offers none. Creation, in Nietzsche's sense, is not about achievement, it's about becoming. Rebellion doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's a quiet decision made in the privacy of your mind. To live by your truth even when no one notices. To reject the easy comfort of imitation. Nietzsche believed that small acts of rebellion, refusing to lie to yourself, refusing to live half awake, are what keep the spirit alive. The world will try to drag you back into conformity, but the creator learns to walk his own path silently, patiently. His rebellion is not against others, it's against his own past limitations. Nietzsche's strength wasn't just intellectual, it was emotional. He endured isolation, illness, and heartbreak, yet he continued to write with fire. His independence wasn't cold detachment, it was the warmth of self-ownership. He found peace in being misunderstood because he knew that greatness is never recognized in its own time. The solitude that once felt like punishment became his sanctuary. It was there, in silence, that his thoughts grew into worlds that would outlive him. Strength, he showed us, isn't the absence of pain, it's the ability to build through it. To become the creator is to accept that you are unfinished. The world tells you to define yourself, to be consistent, to find a label and wear it proudly. But Nietzsche's wisdom was the opposite, to keep becoming. Identity is not a conclusion, it's a movement. Every time you learn, suffer, or love, you change shape. And that's not weakness, it's art in motion. The creator doesn't cling to who they were yesterday. They live in the tension between what they are and what they might still become. Nietzsche's Übermensch was never meant to be a ruler over others. It was a symbol of transcendence, a person who creates meaning from within. In our age, this doesn't mean domination, it means authenticity. The modern creator doesn't seek power over others but mastery over themselves. They rise above the noise of imitation and build quietly, courageously. To think, to feel, to act without the need for validation, that's the essence of the Übermensch. It's not superiority, it's freedom. Freedom is heavy. When you become the creator, there's no one left to blame. Every mistake, every direction, every silence is yours. It's both terrifying and beautiful. Nietzsche believed that this is the ultimate test of the spirit, to carry the full weight of freedom and still choose joy. To live without excuses, without illusions. To wake up each day knowing that meaning is not found but made. That is the work of the creator, to take the chaos of existence and turn it into art. And as the old self dissolves, you realize freedom isn't light. It's the heaviest, most sacred thing you can carry. At the end of the climb, there's no applause. Just silence. You stand at the edge of the mountain you've spent your life ascending, and below you lies everything you once thought you knew. The world looks smaller now, not because it has changed, but because you have. The air is thinner, the noise fainter, and for the first time, you can see patterns you were once too close to notice. This is what Nietzsche meant by elevation, not superiority, but perspective. When you rise above the noise, you begin to see how rare it is to truly think for yourself. From this height, chaos begins to make sense. The pain, the solitude, the endless questioning, they form a pattern you couldn't see before. Every rejection, every sleepless night of doubt, was shaping your perception, preparing you for clarity. Nietzsche believed that wisdom doesn't come from peace but from tension. It's the pressure that forges the diamond. When you think differently, you start to recognize beauty in what once felt unbearable. The struggle wasn't meaningless, it was sculpting you into something honest. In the end, Nietzsche was alone. His body failed him, his mind fractured, and his words were misunderstood by almost everyone around him. But what he left behind was more than philosophy, it was testament. Proof that a single mind, unafraid to think freely, can shake the foundations of entire centuries. His solitude wasn't a tragedy, it was the cost of truth. Every thinker who dares to see beyond their time must pay that price. His silence at the end wasn't defeat, it was the echo of everything he had already said. Real power doesn't shout. It doesn't need validation, followers, or recognition. It moves quietly, like gravity, unseen, but shaping everything. Nietzsche's influence works the same way. His ideas were seeds planted in the soil of misunderstanding, blooming decades after his death. The true power of thinking differently isn't in being heard immediately, it's in planting thoughts that survive time. The creator's reward isn't fame, it's endurance. To think differently is to send ripples through generations, even if you never see the waves. The world needs the outsider more than it knows. Without those who question, civilization stagnates. Without dissent, we lose our direction. Nietzsche believed that progress is driven not by conformity but by tension, the pull between what is and what could be. Every era depends on its misfits, the ones who refuse to look away. Thinking differently isn't rebellion for its own sake, it's evolution. The outsider becomes the bridge between old truths and new possibilities. Their isolation becomes the birthplace of humanity's next step forward. When you think differently, you heal differently too. You stop seeking comfort in distraction and start finding it in understanding. Pain becomes information, not punishment. You no longer see life as something happening to you, but something unfolding through you. Nietzsche's philosophy invites you to embrace suffering as a form of growth, to stop resisting the storms and instead learn to walk in them. Every wound deepens awareness. Every scar is proof of transformation. This is the quiet healing that thinkers know, not the end of pain, but peace with its presence. The secret power of thinking differently isn't defiance, it's creation. It's realizing that your mind is a universe in itself, capable of shaping meaning out of chaos. When you stop waiting for permission to exist as you are, you start building your own world. Every original thought is an act of creation, a rebellion against emptiness. Nietzsche saw this as the highest form of art, not painting or music, but life itself. To live consciously, courageously, is to sculpt existence into something uniquely your own. Eventually, you stop fighting to fit in. The need to prove yourself dissolves. You start to enjoy your own company, the quiet rhythm of your thoughts, the slow unfolding of your inner world. You realize that the loneliness you feared was never emptiness, it was spaciousness. Room to breathe, to grow, to think. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation, it means seeing your uniqueness as part of nature's design. The same way no two leaves are the same, no two minds should be. Peace comes when you stop comparing and start becoming. Maybe the point was never to be understood. Maybe the purpose was to understand yourself so completely that misunderstanding no longer hurts. Nietzsche's challenge wasn't just philosophical, it was deeply personal. He asked us to stop following paths that others paved and to start building our own, even if no one follows. The courage to think differently is the courage to outgrow, not to oppose. To leave behind what no longer fits without bitterness, and to walk forward with quiet strength. And so, we return to Nietzsche's final gift, the idea of the eternal return. To live as if every moment would repeat forever. It's not a curse, it's an invitation. If you had to relive your life infinitely, would you still choose your thoughts, your struggles, your silence? Thinking differently means living so honestly that even eternal repetition wouldn't feel like punishment. You become at peace with your choices, your flaws, your path. That's the ultimate freedom, to think, live, and exist in such harmony with your truth that even infinity wouldn't make you wish for another life.